Captain Minho stood on the bridge of the horizon's dawn and watched the stars bend around his ship. It was the year 2187, and humanity had finally done it. They had broken the light barrier and could now travel between the stars. For 3 months, his crew had been searching for signs of other life in the universe. Today, they had found something. "Captain, we're picking up signals," said Lieutenant Hana from her station. She was the ship's expert on alien languages. Though she had never actually met an alien before, none of them had. "It's not random. Someone is trying to talk to us." Minho felt his heart race. This was it. The moment humanity had dreamed about for thousands of years. "Can you understand it?" he asked. Hana worked at her console, her fingers moving quickly. "The patterns are complex. But I think I can." "Wait. They're switching to our languages now. English, Mandarin, Korean, Spanish. They know about us." A voice came through the speakers, smooth and strange. "Human vessel, we greet you. We are the Galactic Concordat. Please follow our ships to the meeting station. We have much to discuss." 3 enormous ships appeared around them, each one 10 times the size of the horizon's dawn. They looked nothing like human ships. They were beautiful, covered in lights and smooth curves. Minho gave the order to follow them. The meeting station was beyond anything Minho had ever imagined. It was a massive ring floating in space, so large that hundreds of ships could dock at once. Inside, the halls were wide and filled with creatures from dozens of different worlds. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others floated or crawled or moved in ways that made no sense at all. Ambassador Taeyang had joined them for this moment. He was Earth's best diplomat, chosen to represent humanity to whoever they might meet out here. Now he walked beside Minho and Hana through the alien crowds, trying not to stare. They were brought to a great council chamber. 47 species sat in a circle, each one different from the others. At the center stood a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms. This was Velthar, the leader of the Concordat. "Welcome, humans," Velthar said. His voice was kind but tired. "You are young. You have just learned to travel the stars. We have been doing this for 3,000 years. Taeyang bowed respectfully. "We are honored to meet you. We come in peace." "That is good," said another alien, a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. "Because we are at war." The room fell silent. Velthar's eyes showed deep sadness. "For 200 years, we have been fighting an enemy called the Swarm. They are not like us. They do not think as individuals. They are one mind controlling billions of bodies. They consume everything. Planets, stars, entire civilizations. They turn it all into more of themselves." Hana felt cold fear creep through her. "How do you fight something like that?" "With difficulty," Velthar said. "We follow the rules of war that our species have agreed upon. Single ships duel in designated zones. We give warnings before attacks. We negotiate safe passages. We fight with honor." Minho frowned. Something about this didn't make sense, but he kept quiet. "We are losing," Velthar continued. "Slowly, system by system, we fall back. The Swarm does not tire. It does not negotiate. It only grows." "Can we help?" Taeyang asked immediately. Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Velthar held up one of his hands. "You are brave to offer. But you have just learned to travel faster than light. The Swarm has been conquering galaxies for thousands of years. You do not have the technology. You do not have the experience. And you do not understand civilized warfare." "Then teach us," Minho said. "Let us learn." Velthar nodded. "You may observe our battles if you wish. But please, do not interfere. This war is beyond you." 3 days later, Minho watched his first space battle from a safe distance. The Concordat fleet moved in perfect formation, their ships arranged in beautiful geometric patterns. They advanced slowly toward the Swarm forces, following paths that seemed to be agreed upon beforehand. The Swarm ships were ugly things, grown from biological matter instead of built. They looked like massive insects made of metal and meat. But they moved with terrible purpose. The two fleets met in the designated battle zone. Ships paired off, one against one, and began to fight. It was all very organized, very civilized, and Minho watched in growing horror as Concordat ship after Concordat ship was destroyed. Why don't they help each other? Hana whispered beside him. That ship is in trouble. 3 others could save it. But they're just watching. It's not honorable, said a Concordat officer who was showing them the battle. Each captain must face their opponent alone. To interfere would violate the rules of engagement. Minho felt anger building in his chest. He had studied military history back on Earth. He had read about ancient battles and modern wars. He knew what real combat looked like. And this wasn't it. They're going to lose, he said quietly. The officer looked at him with what might have been pity. Yes. Eventually, we will all lose. But we will lose with honor. The battle lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, the Concordat had lost 15 ships. The swarm had lost 10. It was considered a good result. That night, Minho couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. The waste of it. The unnecessary deaths. He thought about all the wars humans had fought against each other, the terrible, brutal, creative ways they had learned to kill. And he thought about how every single one of those wars had taught them something. Humans didn't fight with honor. They fought to win. 2 weeks later, the news came. The swarm had broken through the outer defense line. 3 major Concordat worlds were under threat. Velthar sent out a desperate message to every species in the Concordat, begging for help. Minho stood in the council chamber and listened to the debate. Species after species explained why they couldn't send more ships. They had already sent everything they could spare. They had followed all the proper procedures. There was nothing more to be done within the rules. Then change the rules, Minho said suddenly. The chamber went silent. Every alien eye turned to look at him. You can't win this war fighting fair, Minho continued. The swarm doesn't care about honor. It only cares about surviving and growing. If you want to beat it, you need to fight like you want to win. And what do humans know of war? Demanded one of the council members, a creature covered in scales. Minho looked around at all of them. These advanced species who had known peace for thousands of years. Who thought war was a gentleman's game with rules and honor? Everything, he said simply. We know everything about war. We've been doing it to each other for 10,000 years, and we're very, very good at it. Taeyong stepped forward. Earth wants to help. Let us show you what we can do. Velthar looked at them for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Go back to Earth. Tell them what you have seen. If they truly wish to help, we will not refuse. But understand, the swarm will not be impressed by your courage. It will only see you as more food. Then it's in for a surprise, Minho said. The horizon's dawn turned toward home, carrying a message that would change everything. Humanity was about to go to war. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The emergency session at Earth's United Government lasted for 3 days. Representatives from every nation gathered to watch the recordings Minho had brought back. They saw the swarm. They saw the Concordat losing. They saw alien species that had forgotten how to truly fight. Admiral Yuna stood before the assembly on the final day. She was 50 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from 20 years of military service. She had fought in the resource wars of 2165 and the Mars Rebellion of 2179. She knew war. The Concordat has superior technology, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. Their ships are faster, their weapons stronger, their shields better. But they fight like amateurs. They follow rules in a fight where the enemy has no rules. A representative from Europe stood up. What are you proposing, Admiral? Yuna smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. I'm proposing we show them how humans fight. We don't line up and take turns. We hit from behind. We use tricks. We make them think we're running away. Then we ambush them. We learned all this fighting each other. Now we use it to save them. How many ships can we send? Asked the representative from the Pacific Alliance. 50 warships, said Admiral Yuna. That's all we have that can make the journey. But 50 human ships fighting smart might do more than 500 alien ships fighting fair. The vote was called. Every nation agreed. Earth would go to war. Colonel Hyun was chosen to lead the Special Forces Division. He was a man who had spent his entire career studying unconventional warfare. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, infiltration. All the things that civilized species apparently didn't do anymore. I've been reading about these aliens, he told his team as they prepared to leave Earth. They've been peaceful for so long, they think war is some kind of sport. We're going to remind the galaxy what war really is. Engineer Junho worked day and night preparing the ships. Unlike the beautiful Concordat vessels, human ships were built for function, not form. They were ugly, practical things covered in weapons and armor. Junho added his own modifications. Hidden missile pods, jamming systems, decoy drones. Everything he could think of. The aliens fight like they're in a parade, he told his assistants. We're going to fight like we're in an alley. 6 weeks after the vote, the first expeditionary fleet was ready. 50 ships carrying 10,000 human soldiers and crew. Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable, and looked at her fleet. Take us to the stars, she ordered. It's time the galaxy learned what humanity can do. The journey took 2 weeks. When they arrived at the Concordat meeting station, Velthar himself came to greet them. Your ships are different from what we expected, he said carefully, looking at the angular, aggressive designs of the human vessels. We build ships to fight, not to look pretty, Yuna replied. The Concordat Council gathered to hear Earth's battle plan. Dr. Hana was there too, having been assigned to help translate not just words, but concepts. She knew this meeting would be difficult. Admiral Yuna stood before the council and began her presentation. She showed them battle plans from human history. Hannibal crossing the Alps to surprise Rome. The D-Day invasion of Normandy. The carrier strikes at Midway. The urban warfare in Stalingrad. The aliens looked confused, then disturbed, then horrified. You attacked from unexpected directions, said one council member, a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish. That's considered dishonorable. You used false information to trick your enemies, said another. That's lying. You hid your forces and struck without warning, said a third. That's cowardly. Yuna listened to their complaints without expression. When they finished, she spoke. You know what we call all those things? We call them winning. This is barbaric, said Councillor Rixana, a tall being covered in blue feathers. Warfare is meant to be conducted with honor and dignity. What you describe is little better than murder. War is murder, Yuna said flatly. Organized, official murder. You can dress it up with rules and call it honorable, but at the end of the day, people die. The question is, do you want your people to die following rules, or do you want to actually win? Velthar held up his hands for silence. Admiral Yuna, you must understand. We have built our entire civilization on these principles. Honor in combat, respect for rules, fair engagements. To abandon them would be to abandon who we are. Then you'll die being who you are. Minho said from his seat. The swarm is going to consume you. And your last thought will be about how honorable you were while it happened. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Dr. Hana tried to calm the situation. What my colleagues mean is that we have a different perspective. Humans spent thousands of years fighting ourselves. We did terrible things to each other. But we learned that survival isn't about honor, it's about adaptation. It's about doing whatever it takes. Did you learn your tactics from military academies? Rixana asked mockingly. Or from your entertainment films? Or from your entertainment films? Colonel Hyun laughed at that. Both, actually. Humans have been imagining how to fight aliens since before we could even leave our planet. We've made thousands of films about it. Books. Games. We've been preparing for this our whole history, even though we didn't know it. Taeyang stood up, using his diplomat skills. The Concordat doesn't have to adopt all our methods. But let us try our way. Give us one battle. One chance to show you what we can do. If we fail, you can send us home. But if you succeed, it proves nothing, Rixana interrupted. One battle means nothing in a 200-year war. It means something if we win, Yuna said quietly. Velthar considered for a long time. Finally, he spoke. The swarm is attacking the fortress world of Talaxis. It's a key position. If Talaxis falls, 3 more systems become vulnerable. We are preparing to defend it with traditional tactics. He paused. The human fleet may join the battle, but you must coordinate with our forces. No independent action. Admiral Yuna nodded, but her smile suggested she had her own plans. The fleet moved toward Talaxis. On the journey, human officers tried to explain their tactics to Concordat commanders. The cultural gap was enormous. Why would you pretend to retreat? Asked one alien captain. Retreat is admission of defeat. Retreat is a tool, Hyun explained patiently. You make the enemy think they're winning. They get excited. They chase you. They break formation. Then you turn around, and they're vulnerable. That's trickery. That's strategy. Lieutenant Nari, one of the fleet's best pilots, was having similar conversations with alien pilots. You fly in straight lines, she said, watching their training exercises. The swarm will shoot you down easily. Straight lines are efficient, an alien pilot replied. Evasive patterns are survival, Nari countered. Watch. She took her fighter on a wild series of maneuvers, spinning and diving and rolling in ways that made the aliens nervous just watching. The enemy can't hit what they can't predict. It's reckless. It's staying alive. As they approached Talaxis, the swarm fleet came into view. Hundreds of bioships. Each one, a nightmare of organic technology. They moved like a swarm of insects, because that's exactly what they were. The Concordat fleet prepared to engage in their traditional formation. Admiral Yuna watched them line up in their neat rows. All human ships, she said over the fleet channel. Admiral, Velthar's voice came through on a private channel. You agreed to coordinate. I agreed to join the battle, Yuna replied. I never said we'd fight your way. The swarm fleet advanced. The Concordat fleet moved to meet them in the agreed-upon battle zone. And the human ships scattered in 50 different directions. What are they doing? Rixana's voice shrieked over the command channel. They're running away! The cowards are fleeing! But Minho, watching from his position on the Indomitable's bridge, smiled, because he knew what was about to happen. The swarm, seeing apparent prey fleeing, broke their own formation to chase. They swarmed after the human ships, like predators after wounded animals. And then Admiral Yuna gave the order. All ships, execute attack pattern Alpha. Show them how humans hunt. The human ships turned, every single one of them. And the battle began. The swarm ships chased what they thought was easy prey. They had never seen enemies run before. In 200 years of war, the Concordat species always stood and fought in their designated zones. This new behavior confused the swarm's collective intelligence, but confusion didn't stop them. They pursued. Lieutenant Nari pulled her fighter into a tight spiral as 3 swarm bioships followed. Her small craft was fast and nimble. Unlike the heavy Concordat vessels, she led the enemy ships between 2 large asteroids, then suddenly cut her engines and dropped. The swarm ships shot past her, confused. Before they could turn around, Nari's targeting computer locked on. She fired missiles into their exposed rear sections. All 3 exploded in bursts of organic matter and metal. Fox 3, 3 kills, she reported calmly, already accelerating toward her next target. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human fighters moved like dancers, never staying still, never being where the enemy expected. They used the terrain, hiding behind asteroids and wreckage. They worked in pairs and trios, supporting each other. On the Concordat command ship, Velthar watched the tactical display in shock. The small human fighters were destroying swarm vessels at an incredible rate. "How are they doing this?" he asked. "They're not following any pattern," said one of his tactical officers. "They're improvising. Each pilot fights differently." Admiral Yuna's voice came over the command channel. "All Capitals ships, begin Phase 2. Target the swarm cruisers. Hit and run tactics. Don't stay in one place." The human warships moved in groups of 3 or 4. They would appear, fire everything they had at a target, then immediately retreat. The swarm tried to return fire, but the human ships were already gone, replaced by jamming signals and decoy drones. "They're using false signatures," a Concordate sensor officer reported. "The swarm thinks there are twice as many human ships as there actually are." Engineer Junho watched his creations work perfectly. His electronic warfare systems were flooding the battlefield with false data. The swarm's coordination was breaking down because they couldn't tell which targets were real. "That's cheating," said a Concordate officer nearby. "That's winning," Junho replied without looking away from his screens. Colonel Hyun led a special operations team toward a swarm-occupied station. While the main battle raged, his small ship moved quietly through the chaos. They used debris as cover, powered down their systems to avoid detection, and approached from an unexpected angle. "Just like the Mars Rebellion," Hyun said to his team. "We go in quiet, we hit the command center, we get out before they know we're there." "Sir, the Concordate would call this dishonorable," said one of his soldiers. "The Concordat has been losing for 200 years, Hyun replied. "We're going to win. Mount up." The team infiltrated the station through a damaged section. They moved through corridors filled with organic swarm material, using weapons designed for close combat. When they reached the central nexus, they planted explosives and left the same way they came. The station exploded 12 minutes later, taking out the swarm's local coordination for that entire sector. On the main battlefield, the tide had turned. The Concordat fleet, seeing the human tactics work, began to adapt. Some of the younger commanders started breaking formation, trying to support each other instead of fighting alone. "This is against protocol," Rixana protested. "Protocol is getting us killed," replied General Colven, a veteran Concordate commander who had lost too many friends to outdated tactics. He ordered his squadron to follow the human ships. "If they can fight this way, we can learn." The swarm tried to adapt too. Their collective intelligence began recognizing patterns in the chaos. But every time they thought they understood what the humans were doing, the tactics changed. "They're using a rotating pattern," Nari explained to her squadron. "The enemy starts to predict our moves, so we switch to something completely different. Keep them guessing." Admiral Yuna watched the battle unfold from her command chair. Years of experience told her they were winning. But the cost was high. Human ships were taking damage. Good people were dying, but they were taking 10 times as many enemies with them. "Admiral, the swarm is concentrating forces on the planet's orbital defense stations," reported her tactical officer. "They're trying to break through to the surface." "Send in Lieutenant Nari's fighter wings," Yuna ordered. "Tell them to use the atmospheric technique." Nari received the order and smiled grimly. "All fighters, follow me. We're going to show these things what humans learned from flying in atmospheres." The fighter squadron dove toward the planet, entering the upper atmosphere. The swarm bioships followed. But they had evolved in space. They had never learned to fly in air. Nari used the atmosphere like a weapon. She flew through clouds, using them for cover. She made sharp turns that used air resistance. Maneuvers that only worked with atmosphere. The swarm ships, designed for vacuum, couldn't match her agility. One by one, her squadron picked off the pursuing enemies. Some crashed into the planet's surface, unable to control their descent. Others were hit by missiles they never saw coming through the clouds. "The sky belongs to us," Nari said over the command channel. On the ground, Sergeant Doyun led defense forces protecting the civilian population. The swarm had already landed some troops in the outer cities. These ground units were nightmarish creatures, designed for close combat. But Doyun had fought in the urban battles on Mars. He knew how to turn cities into death traps. His forces used buildings for cover, set up ambush points, and made the swarm pay for every meter of ground. Use the terrain, he ordered his teams. These things are strong, but they're not smart individually. Make them come to you. Then hit them from 3 sides at once. A Concordat officer fighting alongside him was shocked. You're using civilians' homes as fortifications? I'm keeping those civilians alive, Doyun replied. The swarm doesn't care about property damage, neither should we. Win first, rebuild later. The battle for Talaxis lasted 8 hours. That was short compared to traditional Concordat battles, which could last days. But in those 8 hours, the humans had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. War wasn't a game. It wasn't about honor, or rules, or fighting fair. It was about survival. It was about using every advantage, every trick, every bit of creativity you had. It was about being willing to do whatever it took to protect what mattered. When the swarm finally retreated, the damage reports came in. The Concordat fleet had lost 20 ships. The human fleet had lost 7. But they had destroyed over 90 swarm vessels. The Concordat officers stared at the numbers in disbelief. It was a victory ratio they hadn't seen in 200 years. Admiral Yuna stood in the command center of the Talaxis station, looking out at the orbital wreckage. Velthar approached her quietly. Your methods are brutal, he said. Effective, but brutal. Yes, Yuna agreed. We learned them being brutal to each other. Every war humanity ever fought taught us something new about violence, about strategy, about survival. We have thousands of years of experience in killing. It's not something we're proud of, but right now, it's what you need. The Council will want a full report, Velthar said. They will want to understand how you achieved this. Tell them the truth, Yuna replied. Humans fight to win. We don't care about looking brave or honorable. We care about going home alive. And we'll do anything, use any tactic, break any rule to make that happen. Minho joined them, his uniform dirty from helping with rescue operations. The question isn't whether our methods are pretty, he said. The question is whether you want to keep losing slowly with honor, or start winning with whatever it takes. Dr. Hana had been working with the wounded, both human and alien. She looked exhausted. The swarm doesn't care about your honor, she said to Velthar. It doesn't even understand the concept. To beat it, you need to fight with everything you have. The way humans do. Velthar looked at each of them, these humans who had come from nowhere, who had been in space for less than a year, who had just won a battle that should have been impossible. The Council will need to see this for themselves, he said finally. But I believe you have changed something today. For 200 years, we have been slowly losing. Today, we won. That cannot be ignored. News of the battle spread across the Concordat like fire. Some species were horrified by human tactics. Others were intrigued. But everyone was paying attention. The swarm was paying attention too. Somewhere in the depths of space, the collective intelligence processed what had happened at Talaxis. It had faced a new enemy. An enemy that didn't follow predictable patterns. An enemy that used tactics it had never encountered before. The swarm began to adapt. But so did humanity. Because humans had learned long ago that adaptation was the key to survival. And the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity's greatest weakness became its greatest strength. Professor Sora arrived from Earth 3 weeks after the Battle of Talaxis. She was a military historian, someone who had spent her entire career studying how humans made war. Now, she stood before a classroom of alien officers, all of them eager to understand what the humans had done. War is not natural to you, she began, looking at the assembled aliens. You achieved peace thousands of years ago. You forgot how to truly fight. But humans? We never stopped. We fought each other for food, for land, for ideas, for resources. We got very good at it. She displayed images on the screen. Ancient battles with swords and spears. Naval conflicts with wooden ships and cannons. Aerial dogfights from the world wars. tank battles across deserts, urban combat in ruined cities. Every war taught us something new, Sora continued. We learned to use terrain as a weapon. We learned to deceive our enemies. We learned that the element of surprise was worth more than superior numbers. We learned that rules were for peacetime, and survival was for war. A Concordat officer raised a limb. But didn't these wars cause terrible suffering? Yes, Sora said simply. Millions died. Billions. Across all our conflicts. It was horrible. But we learned, and now, that knowledge can save the entire galaxy. General Colven attended every lecture. He was older than most Concordat commanders. Old enough to remember when the war with the Swarm first started. He had watched friends die following honorable tactics that didn't work. Tell me about combined arms, he asked Sora after one session. She smiled. Combined arms means using different forces together. Fighters cover the capital ships. Ground troops coordinate with orbital strikes. Everyone supports everyone else. You don't fight alone. You fight as one organism. But our traditions say each warrior must face their opponent alone. Your traditions are why you've been losing for 200 years, Sora replied bluntly. The Swarm is one mind controlling many bodies. They naturally fight as combined arms. You need to do the same. Colven began implementing these ideas with his own fleet. Other commanders watched his success and started copying him. Slowly, the Concordat military culture began to change. Captain Minji arrived with the second wave of human forces. She was a specialist in psychological operations. Her job was to understand how the enemy thought and use that against them. The Swarm is a hive mind, she explained to Admiral Yuna. That's a strength, but also a weakness. They think as one. If we can confuse or overwhelm that central intelligence, they all become confused. How do we do that? Yuna asked. Minji smiled. We make them see things that aren't there. We attack from directions that shouldn't exist. We do things no rational species would do. We make them doubt their own sensors. She worked with engineer Junho to create new electronic warfare systems. These would send false signals, fake distress calls, phantom fleet signatures. The goal was to make the Swarm paranoid, to make them waste resources checking threats that didn't exist. During this time, Concordat intelligence managed to capture a small Swarm node. It was brought to a secure facility where Dr. Hana and Minji could study it. It's still connected to the larger intelligence, Hana discovered. But it's like a finger on a hand. It can feel and respond, but it doesn't think independently. Minji studied the creature carefully. In 200 years of war, the Swarm has never faced an unpredictable enemy. Every Concordat species follows patterns. They're logical, consistent. But humans? We're chaos, Hana finished. Creative chaos, Minji corrected. We improvise, we adapt, we do things that don't make logical sense but work anyway. The Swarm doesn't know how to process that. They conducted experiments, showing the Swarm node different scenarios. When faced with standard Concordat tactics, it responded perfectly, already knowing the countermove. But when shown human tactics, it hesitated. It calculated. It couldn't predict what would happen next. It's like playing chess against someone who doesn't know the rules, Hana said. They make moves that shouldn't work, but because you're expecting normal moves, they catch you off guard. This information was crucial. It confirmed what the human suspected. The Swarm could adapt to logical patterns. But human creativity was something entirely different. 3 months after Talaxis, a joint human Concordat task force executed their first major operation together. The target was a Swarm supply base that had been operating for 50 years. General Colven commanded the Concordat forces. Colonel Hyun commanded the humans. Together, they planned an attack that would have been unthinkable before first contact. We'll use a traditional Concordat approach, Colven explained to the assembled officers. We'll challenge them to a fleet engagement in the designated combat zone. And while they're focused on that, Hyun continued with a grin. My special forces will infiltrate the base from 3 different directions and plant charges in the central reactor. Then both forces retreat, making it look like we're losing. The swarm will pursue, leaving the base less defended. And when they're far enough away, boom, both commanders said together. The operation went exactly as planned. The swarm responded to the fleet challenge with their standard tactics, moving forces to the combat zone. Hyun's teams infiltrated during the distraction. When the explosives detonated, the entire base was destroyed, and the swarm fleet found themselves far from home with no support. Kolven's ships, reinforced by human vessels using Nari's atmospheric flying techniques, destroyed the swarm fleet completely. It was the first time Concordat forces had executed a deception operation. Many were uncomfortable with it, but none could argue with the results. The swarm lost 3 more major bases over the next few weeks. Each operation combined Concordat technology with human tactics. Each one was different from the last. The swarm tried to adapt, but how do you adapt to enemies who never do the same thing twice? During a strategy session, Velthar looked at the star maps with new eyes. For 200 years, we defended. We held our ground. We reacted to swarm attacks. But you humans, you think differently. We go on the offensive, Yuna said. Defense is important, but you can't win by only defending. Eventually you run out of space to retreat to. We learned that from studying predators, Professor Sora added. The best defense is to eliminate the threat. You don't wait for the wolf to attack your village. You go hunt the wolf. But the swarm territory is vast, Rixana protested. She had become less hostile to human methods after seeing them work, but she was still cautious. We don't know where their central intelligence is located. We could spend decades searching. Then we make them tell us, Minji said. We create a threat they can't ignore. Something that forces the central intelligence to respond directly. And when it does, we trace the signal back to its source. What kind of threat would make them respond? Velthar asked. Minji looked at Admiral Yuna. We make them think we've found their homeworld. We prepare a massive fake invasion fleet and move it toward a system we think might be important. The central intelligence will have to coordinate a defense. When it does, our sensors will track the command signals. That's incredibly risky, said Kolven. If we're wrong, we waste resources. If we're right, we might trigger a massive counterattack. Risk is part of war, Yuna replied. Something else you forgot during 3,000 years of peace. The operation took 6 weeks to prepare. A fleet of over 300 ships, half human and half concordat, moved toward a system that intelligence suggested might be significant to the swarm. They made no attempt to hide their approach. Every swarm sensor would see them coming. That was the point. The swarm responded exactly as predicted. Ships poured in from a dozen systems to defend the location. But more importantly, the signals increased. The central intelligence was coordinating the defense personally. Minji's sensors tracked every communication pulse. She worked with Concordat scientists to trace the signals through multiple relay points. It took hours of careful analysis. But finally, they had it. There, she said, pointing to a star system on the edge of swarm territory. That's where the signals are originating. That's their central nexus. Velthar stared at the location. In 200 years of war, we never found it. You've been here for 6 months, and you located their brain. That's because we think like hunters, not defenders, Hyun said. We don't wait for the enemy to come to us. We track them back to their den. The false invasion fleet retreated, having accomplished its mission. The swarm likely thought they had won another battle. They had no idea what they had just revealed. Back at Concordat headquarters, the greatest minds from dozens of species gathered. Now they had a target. Now they could plan a real offensive. But attacking the swarm's central nexus would require everything they had. This will be the largest military operation in Concordat history, Velthar announced. We will combine our technology with human tactics. We will use every resource available, and we will end this war. Admiral Yuna stood beside him. The swarm has been winning because they fight as one mind. Now we'll show them what happens when multiple species truly work together. With creativity, adaptation, and the determination to win. Professor Sora watched the gathered species planning together. Aliens who had fought alone for 2 centuries, now learning to combine their strengths. Technology and tactics, merging into something new. Humanity had brought war to a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight, but in doing so, they had also brought hope. The war room held representatives from every species in the Concordat. Maps covered the walls, showing the swarm territory and the location of their central nexus. Everyone knew this was it. The final battle. Win or lose, this operation would decide everything. Admiral Yuna stood at the center, now officially commanding the combined fleet. In 6 months, she had gone from Earth's admiral to the military leader of an entire galaxy. Beside her stood General Colven, who had become humanity's strongest ally among the Concordat species. Operation Eclipse, Yuna began, pointing to the star maps. Named after an old Earth term for when one thing covers another. We're going to cover the swarm in darkness, she outlined the plan. It was complex and ambitious. It required perfect coordination between hundreds of ships from dozens of different species. It involved deception, misdirection, and aggressive action in ways the Concordat had never attempted before. We'll attack on 5 fronts, Colvin explained. The swarm will see major fleet movements threatening their outer systems. They'll move forces to defend, thinking those are the real targets. Meanwhile, Colonel Hyun continued, my special forces teams will infiltrate their command networks. We'll plant viruses, false data, anything to disrupt their coordination. And while all that is happening, Yuna finished, the main strike force will hit the Nexus world directly, fast, hard, and with everything we have. What if it doesn't work? Rixana asked. She had become more supportive of human methods, but she was still cautious. Then we adapt, Minho said. He had been promoted to fleet admiral and would command one of the strike groups. That's what humans do best. We have plans A through Z. If one doesn't work, we move to the next. Velthar spoke for the first time. Some species are refusing to participate. They say this operation is too aggressive, too risky, too human. Ting, let them stay home, Yuna said flatly. We'll win without them. And when the war is over, they can live in the peace we bought for them. The operation launched 2 weeks later. The largest military fleet in galactic history moved out in perfect coordination. 5 separate strike forces headed toward swarm territory, each one big enough to look like a major invasion. The swarm responded exactly as predicted. Their forces spread out to meet each threat. Their central intelligence worked overtime to coordinate the defense. And that's when Minji's electronic warfare hit them. False signals filled the swarm networks, fake distress calls from systems that weren't under attack, phantom fleet movements that didn't exist, conflicting orders that seemed to come from the central nexus itself. It's working, Minji reported from her command ship. Their coordination is breaking down. They're seeing threats everywhere. While the swarm was distracted, Hyun's special forces struck. 20 small teams infiltrated swarm-controlled systems, moving silently through enemy territory. They planted charges on relay stations. They hacked into communication networks. They created chaos in the enemy's nervous system. Team 3 in position, Hyun reported. Charges set. Ready to blow on your command. Team 3. Charges set. Hold position, Yuna ordered. Wait for the main strike. The main strike force, led by Admiral Yuna on the Indomitable and Fleet Admiral Minho on the Horizon's Dawn, approached the Nexus world from an unexpected direction. They had traveled through an unstable region of space that the Concordat would never have risked. The route was dangerous, but it meant they arrived undetected. Lieutenant Nari led the fighter screen. Her squadron had grown to include pilots from 3 different species, all trained in human tactics. They moved ahead of the capital ships, scouting for threats. Multiple swarm ships in orbit around the Nexus, she reported. Defense stations on the surface. This is heavily protected. How heavily? Yuna asked. Very heavily, Admiral. Maybe we should We should attack, Yuna interrupted. All fighters, begin your runs. Capital ships, prepare for bombardment. We're going in hot. The battle began with a surprise strike. Nari's fighters dove toward the planet, using atmospheric techniques to evade the orbital defenses. They targeted the defense stations with precision strikes, opening holes in the swarm's protection. The capital ships followed, pouring fire into the gaps. Concordate beam weapons combined with human missile salvos created a devastating assault. But the swarm wasn't defenseless. Bioships poured up from the planet's surface. More arrived from nearby systems, responding to the Central Intelligence's call for help. We're outnumbered 3-1, Colvin reported from his command ship. Then we make them pay for those numbers, Yuna replied. All ships, pattern Delta 7. Make them chase us into the kill zones. The human ships scattered, drawing swarm vessels away from the planet. The swarm followed, just as predicted. They flew directly into ambush positions where concordate ships waited with charged weapons. Now, Colvin ordered. His fleet opened fire at point-blank range, catching the swarm completely by surprise. Dozens of bioships exploded in the first salvo. On the ground, Sergeant Doyun led the landing forces. They dropped onto the Nexus world in heavily armored transports, heading straight for the Central Intelligence structure. The swarm ground forces were massive and deadly. But Doyun's teams had trained together for weeks. Humans and aliens fought side by side, using combined tactics that neither could have managed alone. Use the buildings for cover, Doyun ordered. Concordate forces, your shields in front. Humans, fire through the gaps. Support each other. It was brutal urban combat. Slow, grinding, progress through hostile territory. But they kept advancing. In space, the battle raged. Admiral Yuna coordinated the chaos, keeping multiple groups moving, attacking, retreating, and attacking again. The swarm couldn't predict what would happen next. Admiral, we're taking heavy casualties, one captain reported. Should we fall back? Negative, Yuna replied. Colonel Hyun, blow the relay stations. Now, across 5-star systems, Hyun's charges detonated. The swarm's communication network went dark. Suddenly, the Central Intelligence couldn't coordinate its forces. Individual bioships started acting on their own, without the unified strategy. They're confused, Minho shouted from the horizon's dawn. All ships, press the advantage. The combined fleet surged forward. Without coordination, the swarm ships fell quickly. One by one, they were destroyed or driven off. On the planet's surface, Doyun's forces reached the central structure. It was enormous, grown from the same organic technology as the swarm ships. It pulsed with bioelectric energy. This is it, Doyun said. Plant the charges, maximum yield. We're ending this today. His demolition teams placed powerful explosives around the structure's foundation. They had only minutes before the swarm reinforcements would arrive. Charges set, a voice reported. 30 seconds to detonation. All ground forces, evacuate now, Doyun ordered. Get to the transports. The teams ran. Behind them, the Central Intelligence structure began to glow, sensing what was about to happen. The swarm forces went into a frenzy, trying to stop them. Lieutenant Nari and her squadron dove from orbit, providing cover fire. Come on, she muttered. Watching the ground forces sprint for their ships, the last transport lifted off just as the charges detonated. The explosion was massive, destroying the central structure and everything around it for several kilometers. In space, every swarm ship suddenly stopped moving. The Central Intelligence was gone. The hive mind had been destroyed. The bioships drifted without purpose, no longer receiving commands. Cease fire, Yuna ordered quietly. It's over. Across the fleet, crews stood in stunned silence. After 203 years, the war was finally over. The victory came at a cost. 18 human ships had been destroyed. 42 concordate vessels. Thousands of lives lost. But millions, perhaps billions, had been saved. Back at Concordat headquarters, the celebration was muted. People were exhausted, grieving, but also hopeful for the first time in 2 centuries. Velthar found Admiral Una in a quiet observation deck, looking out at the stars. She looked tired, older than her years. "You did it," he said softly. "You came from nowhere and ended a war we thought we'd lost." "We did it," Una corrected. "All of us together. Humans provided the tactics, but your people provided the courage to change." "That's not easy. Your methods were brutal, effective, but brutal." Una nodded. "That's humanity. We learned to fight in the worst ways possible. We hurt each other for thousands of years. But all that pain taught us how to survive, and now we use that knowledge to save the galaxy." "What happens now?" Velthar asked. "Now we rebuild," Una said. "You teach us about peace and civilization. We teach you about staying ready for the next threat, because there will always be another threat." Over the following months, the galaxy transformed. Earth was given a permanent seat on the Galactic Council. Ambassador Taeyang worked to integrate humanity into the Concordat while preserving what made each species unique. The Interspecies Military Academy was established on a neutral world. Professor Sora became its first headmaster, teaching combined tactics to a new generation of officers from dozens of species. Dr. Hana founded the Institute for Galactic Understanding, helping species bridge the cultural gaps between them. She worked to ensure that the violence humanity had brought was balanced with the wisdom to use it only when necessary. Admiral Una retired from military service. She wrote a book about the war, hoping future generations would learn from both the victories and the mistakes. The book became required reading at the academy. Colonel Hyun continued teaching unconventional warfare, though he always emphasized that such methods should be a last resort, not a first choice. Lieutenant Nari became a flight instructor, training the next generation of pilots in survival techniques. Engineer Junho led the effort to integrate human and concordate technology, creating ships that combined the best of both approaches. Fleet Admiral Minho took command of the new Combined Defense Force, a fleet designed to protect the galaxy from future threats. Under his leadership, dozens of species learned to work together as one. A memorial was built on the planet where the final battle had taken place. It listed every name of those who had died in the war, human and alien alike. At the center was an inscription in all the languages of the Concordat. They fought with fire to defend the light. They used violence to preserve peace. They taught us that survival requires both the will to fight and the wisdom to know when fighting is necessary. May we never forget either lesson. One evening, Velthar and Captain Minho stood together at the memorial, looking at the endless list of names. "Do you think the galaxy is better for having met humanity?" Velthar asked. Minho considered carefully. "We brought war to a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight. But we also brought the will to survive, the courage to adapt, the belief that no enemy is unbeatable. Whether that's better?" He paused. "Ask me in 100 years." They stood in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human warships patrolled alongside alien vessels. The first class of multi-species warriors was graduating from the academy, learning that sometimes the best path to peace was being prepared for war. Humanity had joined the galactic community in the worst possible way, during the darkest possible time. But in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of something crucial. Hope isn't about fighting fair. Hope is about fighting smart. Hope is about never giving up, no matter how bad things look. Hope is about using every advantage, every trick, every bit of creativity you have. Hope is about doing whatever it takes to survive. And humanity, with 10,000 years of warfare behind them, knew how to survive better than anyone. The cosmos had been astonished when humanity joined the battle. But the astonishment had turned to respect, and the respect had turned to partnership. Together, the species of the galaxy faced an uncertain future, united by the bonds forged in fire. And somewhere on Earth, in military academies and war colleges, young humans continued studying the art of warfare, not because they loved violence, but because they understood that peace must sometimes be defended with strength. The galaxy had learned from humanity, and in turn, humanity was learning what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves. The best films about alien warfare had imagined first contact in 1,000 different ways. But reality had proven stranger and more wonderful than any fiction, because the truth was simple. When the cosmos needed saving, humanity didn't bring superior technology or ancient wisdom. They brought 10,000 years of fighting, and that made all the difference.